on the side slide.
Kilo Alpha 46, Pooh Bear Hamilby.
297. Hey, we got you in, Robbie.
Hello, welcome back. It's Fred up in the Radio Shack and the second part of this beginner's guide to CB radio. Before we get right into this video, I'd just like to thank everybody who watched the first video and especially those who took the time to leave a comment. You never know how these things are going to work out, but very, very encouraging. Thank you. Just a couple to mention. John Milner. He said, hey, when am I going to get into SSB kit because he's interested in that? Well, John, that'll be later on in this video. We're going to discuss the SSB radios that I know personally. Don said that he's come back on radio and around the Liverpool area it's very busy. He's had up to 50 contacts already. So well done, Don. It's nice to know that towns are busy. Eddie said that he's been really waiting for a very easy to understand beginner's guide. Well, Eddie, that's what it's going to be over the next few videos. And Peter said, and this is quite important, that always remember to use a handle. Don't use your real name. Don't give out any personal information over the radio. You never know who's listening. You don't particularly want unsavoury characters maybe turning up on your doorstep. So that was a good tip, Peter. Now, the way these videos are going to work, it's going to seem a little bit strange to you watching this. Generally, what I do is I build up a little bit of a backlog of videos, normally over a few weeks, and I filter those onto the channel. Between now and Christmas, you're going to see some different videos coming up on Fred in his Shed. I like to mix it up a little bit just before Christmas. So, yeah, there's going to be some different stuff other than radio come on the channel. I understand if it's not your thing, you know, just don't watch it. Please don't thumb it down. There'll be a PMR review and stuff like that. But these basic guide, starting guide videos, it's all I'm going to work on now between now and Christmas, although it won't seem that way on the channel. It's going to be a bit disjointed, but no. So what I'm doing is that I'm making the first video, I'm reading the comments, reading the feedback, and I'm going to try to bring that in interactively, bring that in into the second, third and fourth video. It's going to take me a lot longer doing it that way. It's not the way I normally work. So you have to be patient with me, but I'm hoping that I'll get a lot more information out there, what you want to hear. Now, if you was a breaker back in the day, like I know a lot of you will be watching this video, it's quite possible you've got an old 40-channel FM UK radio in the attic in a cupboard somewhere. And as long as it's not got damp, it will work absolutely fine. And that might be fine to get you started. The good news is that as from 8th of December 2006, Ofcom deregulated CB radio, so you no longer need to purchase an operating licence. It's licence free. If you've been away from CB for many years, well, let me tell you what's changed. Firstly, nothing really changed up until the 1st of September 1987. And then in the UK, we got an additional 40 channels, only on FM, unfortunately. But this was the mid-blocks. This is the SEPT Euroband. And CB became 80 channels. Also, the antenna restrictions laid down by the government and the Radio Authority, they were lifted. So you could now have an antenna of any length, and it was down to the council to impose any restrictions on where you mounted it. And then, well, nothing really changed. CB got forgotten about. But finally, on the 27th of June 2014, we were allowed legal AM upper and lower sideband, and that was important because that SEPT EU mid-block, those 40 channels, were compatible with USA. So on AM now we could get across the pond and finally, when the skip allowed, communicate to America. I don't know how things are where you are. I know I get a lot of USA viewers now, but in the UK we are unfortunately slipping into a recession. Money is getting tight. Our heating bill for this house, for example, has doubled in the last 3 months, which is pretty shocking. So when I do introduce these radios and equipment, I'm always going to start on the lower end. Try and get into the hobby as cheaply as possible because you may not get on with it. You may not like it. You can always sell the equipment if you keep the radios in their boxes, especially sideband radios, and you put them on the marketplace, Facebook or eBay, something like that. You generally get back about 80% of their value. You won't lose an awful lot of money on the radios. There's a lot of choice when it comes down to radios, whether we stick legal or we go over to the dark side. We'll leave the dark side out for a moment. Let's talk about fully legal UK compliant radios. This is where I came into the hobby. I wasn't interested in the other side of it. Let's just take this as an example. This is my little President Truman. I'm not sure this is made anymore, but a beginner's radio, if you like. But it's still got phenomenal amounts of channels on it. To start with, you've got your regular 40 FM channels, as we've already had with the odd frequency. Then you've got the mid-block, which is the EU SEPT channels. So you've got 40 of them. But also, other than FM, we can go on to AM. So you've got Euro AM. The Euro AM band, the AM channels, correspond with United States of America channels. So that gives you America channels, including their very, very popular Channel 6 Super Bowl channels. Then by pressing another couple of buttons in combination, you've got a whole series of banks of other channels for other countries. Not English speaking, all of them. Poland, Italy, France, things like that. So I've not really worked it out, but if you allow for the AM and FM modes and the banks of channels, you've probably got over 300 channels, maybe 350 channels, just on this UK compliant radio. And that's before you go over to sideband, which gives you upper and lower sideband. So yeah, you're up to probably 600, 650 separate channels. So it's a lot more complicated. There's a lot more to listen to than the old 40 channels we had in the day. The good news is there's a lot of choice for legal AM and FM radios. Popular companies that make them or produce them or brand them would be Midland. They've got a few nice radios. TTI, again, nice radios. Also Thunderpole have got their own name, their own brand on radios, and they look quite good to me. But I'm only really going to talk about the radios that I know, and these are radios that I've owned myself or radios that I've had copies with people on air, so I can confirm that the audio is quite good. So kicking off at the lower end of the market, just to get you started, I think a good radio is the CRT1. Comes in at about £50. 4-watt Paul started on a CRT1. Jez, the guy who goes to CB on a bike, he had a CRT1 on a bike. I got a good copy of him. The only thing I don't like about the radio is that you cannot change the microphone. The microphone is hardwired. But it does come with one of the better CRT microphones as standard. I don't think you need to change it at this price point. Moving up from that, around about the same price, but it may be discontinued when I make this video, is the CRT Millennium. Same sort of thing as a CRT1, very, very small, very compact radio. You can almost put it into a coat pocket. Again, I've contacted people on a Millennium. Again, very, very good audio. Another radio that CRT have brought out recently is the CRT Alpha. It looks quite nice. It looks a bit like a President radio. I've not had any contacts with anyone on that Alpha, but I've noticed that it uses the good quality CRT microphone. If you're not daunted by a menu-driven radio, a radio where buttons have two features, then the CRT 2000 is a great looking radio, a really nice OLED display on that, giving you plenty of information, including the frequency, which is quite useful. Again, I've had contacts with people on that. The audio, really, really good. It probably doesn't sound any better than the CRT one, but there's a lot more to play with on that radio. If you're a gadget freak and you want something to sit and press buttons and play with, that might be a radio for you. Personally, I'm quite a big fan of President radios, hence I've got the Truman and the Grant too. Now, President radios tend to be a little bit more expensive. It doesn't help that the pound against the dollar is especially weak at the moment. But let's just go through some of those. So, kicking off, you've got the President Teddy 2, another very compact, very nice radio. It looks very clear, very easy to understand. Not contacted anyone on that. Then you've got my President Truman. I think that's been discontinued, unfortunately, but I've had great contacts on that. Very, very good audio reports on the standard mic, so I can't imagine that any of the other President radios will be any worse. I imagine they'll be the same. So the Truman, if you can get one, is a good radio. Moving up, we've got the President Barry. Comes in at about £100. Just got a few more features than the Teddy's got. Again, that's a nice looking radio. Now, you notice that all of these radios I've shown you, they're all digital based. So you've got LCD displays. If you want something old school with an analog display, you know, like we used to have, I know a lot of people crave after that. Unfortunately, you're going to have to pay a little bit more money for that. It's just the nature of the beast. But there is the President Taylor that has an analog display. Comes in at about £170. not particularly cheap, but it's a nice looking radio. And also the President Walker, again, very traditional looking, still has all of the manual options that you expect, but it's got that nice swing analog power meter. £180 you'll pay for a Walker. So good news there. If you want a fully legal AM FM radio, plenty of choice. Now if you want to go over to sideband so you can get some of those DX contacts and get a little bit further distance for your signal, well, it's not such a good story actually for UK legal radios. I think because we didn't get sideband until 2014, not many manufacturers have taken it up for the UK. Now, as I'm making this video, there's only 2 legal radios that I can find on the market, which is quite shocking really. The first one is a good radio, and that's the President McKinley. Now, I know about 3 people that have got this radio. Steph's got one on the 305, uses it all the time. Very, very good audio from this radio. Really nice radio. Downside of the McKinley is I just think it's too expensive. It typically goes for £280 to £300, and that's quite a lot of money for a small radio. The only other UK legal sideband radio I could find at the time of making this video, and I don't actually think it's going to improve to be honest, is the Albrecht 5890. Comes in at about £210, and that can be supplied as a legal UK compliant radio. So yeah, not a great deal of choice really. Now they've stopped making a Grant 2 because that was actually legal as well. But yeah, not really a great choice. And that brings us round now to Darkside radios, what we call going on to the dark side. I'll use this CRT 6900 as an example. These radios were never designed really to be used on the CB band, the 11 metre band. As you can see, it says it's a 10 metre. Mobile transceiver is a ham radio transceiver, supposed to be used with a ham radio operating license, but as you can see there, can be programmed by a computer, has SDR infrastructure in its programming, so it can be very easily programmed to operate on the lower 11 metre CB band, and also can be programmed with our 11 metre FM UK channels. So let's not beat about the bush, let's get straight to the point. If you buy one of these radios and you use it as a CB radio, it makes no difference what power setting you use, you are breaking the law in the UK and you can be prosecuted. It is possible that all of your illegal equipment can be confiscated and you will get a hefty fine, because under the law, Ofcom are legally entitled to do that. In truth, since they deregulated it back in 2006 and the licence fee was taken away and CB has become so less popular than it once was, as far as I'm aware, and I have searched on the internet, there's been no prosecutions by Ofcom for using illegal equipment. The last one I found was I think 2010, where someone was they were running a lot of power and they was interfering with a hospital, and then Ofcom did act. If anyone's going to get done, it's going to be me, because I'm blatantly, and I have been doing this for the last 6 or 7 years, I'm blatantly making these videos demonstrating illegal equipment. So I'll probably be the first one to get done. But as far as I'm aware, when I'm making this video, the hundreds of people that I've spoken to locally on CB using these radios or ham radio equipment, using linear amplifiers, which are also illegal, no one, as far as I'm aware, has been prosecuted, has been done. But that's not to say it could not happen, and that's the risk that you take if you veer over to the dark side. Be under no illusions about that. Why do we take the risk then? Why do we choose to buy these imported illegal radios if there is, no matter how slight, if there is a risk of being prosecuted? Firstly, it comes down to choice. As I've just shown you, I can only find 2 legal sideband radios currently on the UK market. If you know of another one, by the way, put that in the comments. It really would help people in the future. Take that President McKinley, for example, yeah? Very nice little radio, £300. It is quite a lot of money to set up. Typically, you can buy an imported radio for £100 less, maybe £150 less, depending on what model you buy. And we'll have a look at those in a moment. So it comes down to price. There's also a lot more choice on these imported radios, more models to choose from. And then there's the power thing. Obviously, now, legally, on sideband, you're only allowed 12 watts. And to be honest, you can do a hell of a lot on 12 watts. I can, on a good day, talk to everyone on my net on 12 watts. Dan from Hatfield, for example, he's got a little radio. He uses 10 watts of power, and that's absolutely fine on a good day. The problem we've got is noise. Now, on FM, for example, I can get, typically on a normal day, probably 3 to 4 on the meter of static, of noise. At a weekend, that can go up to 7 to 8. On a bank holiday, when everybody's home and using their equipment, that can hit S9 of static solid noise. Someone's calling me on 4 watts, maybe they're 10 miles away because we're spread out. They might give me an S5 signal. If I've got S8 or S9 of noise, I'm simply not going to hear them. I might get the occasional word, but there's no way I'm going to be able to make contact with them. Now, these radios, they are too powerful for the UK. This one in particular, this will push 40 watts on FM. I think it's 30 watts on sideband and 15 or 20 on AM. Let me know if you know the AM, I'm not really sure. 40 watts on FM, that's plenty. You're not really good. You can turn it up and down. You're not really going to need that full power. But if I contact someone, say I'm on legal power 4 watts, and someone says, and this is so typical and this will happen, say, yeah, breaker, I know you're out there, I can hear you, you're right in my noise level, I know you're there, but I just can't do the two-way with you. Sorry, I've got too much noise. If I can crank it up to 15, 20 watts, that might just be enough to break through their noise level and I can make the contact. It's so frustrating if you're trying to talk to someone, but you're getting wiped out by their local noise. Same thing with foreign DX contacts. When the radio propagation is there, when the skips coming in, can get very, very busy, especially if you go on to the 27555, the triple nickel channel where everyone meets up. And there again, at that little bit of extra power, having 30 watts on sideband compared to 12 watts, it will help you get contacts. It might be the difference between breaking through, getting a contact, and basically being lost again in the mush, being lost in noise. So there is that advantage of having that little bit of extra power. Now we've talked about the reasons why we choose to use these import radios. Let's talk about what's on the market. These are radios that I've either owned myself or I've had the pleasure of talking to people on the air, so I can vouch for their transmit quality. Right down at the bottom, the cheapest SSB import radio has to be the Anytone 5555. Now, this was the radio I think that started it all off. This was the first one that came into the UK that was imported, and it was very quickly copied to the point where we now refer to it as the Anyclone 5555 because there's so many different versions, including the 6900. But it's a good radio. Typically, you can get these from about 150 to about 170, 175 pounds, something like that. So it's not expensive, not that much more than a normal AM FM radio. The only thing I would say against it is the microphone. When I've spoken to people on them, they sound a little bit tinny. The audio is a little bit thin, a little bit tinny on the standard mic, but it's so easy and cheap to upgrade that and buy yourself a better mic. Then comes the radio that I personally like, and that is the old CRT Superstar 6900. Version 7 now, would you believe? It's supposed to have better filtering than my version, but to be honest with you, my version is absolutely fine. 6900. Current UK price is 170 to 180. The microphone, again on the 6900, I'm not a lover of the M6 microphone that comes with it. For some reason they ship this microphone. I prefer the M9 microphone that you get on a 9900, and I believe you get that on the cheaper radios like the CRT1. Why they do that, I don't know. Again, my own personal experience with the M6 microphone is that the audio quality is quite thin. There is a big thick rubber foam pad that you can take out of the microphone case. I did a video on that. You can mod it to improve the sound quality slightly, but I still think the standard microphone is a bit lacking. Again, it's very easy to upgrade. I've upgraded mine to a DMC 110, KPO DMC 110. Cost me about £12, makes the world of difference. Very, very good radio, the 6900. Another radio is definitely worth considering is the Alinco DX10, or sometimes known as the Alinco DR135. Just cost a few pounds more than the 6900. There's not much in it these days. It's about £195. Very similar to the 6900 in features. I've not owned one. I do plan to get one at some point in the future. Not owned one, but I know, for example, Pucker Dave bought one a little while ago. He was very, very happy with the radio. It's slightly smaller than the 6900. It's more din-sized. He said the quality of the controls was slightly better than the 6900. Also, the microphone on that does sound perhaps a little bit thin, but again, very easy to upgrade. That is a nice looking radio. Another CRT radio, I'm sticking with CRTs at the moment. Another CRT radio is the 7900. This came out a while ago. When this first came out, it appealed to me because it's got a really nice display on it. It's got an LCD display, including the power meter. There were a few problems though with the audio on this radio, and a few people were quite disappointed. I did hear an early version on the 305, and it didn't sound very good. Apparently they've upgraded it. And someone, I can't remember who it was, might have been Awesome Dave, no, it might have been Pucker Dave again. Someone came on quite fairly recently with a 7900 and it sounded absolutely great. In fact, it sounded just the same as a 6900. You couldn't tell the difference. It's more menu based, so if you like to go into menus and you like to play with options and you like an LCD display, then yeah, I think that's a good radio. Then we move up to the CRT Superstar 9900. Also, this is the Anytone 6666. It's the same radio, basically, and about the same price. Cost of this one is around about £230. So about the same price as the 7900. Now, this radio, people often say to me, comes up in the comments all the time, Fred, I'm getting started back into radio. I've not had a sideband radio before. Do you recommend I get the 6900? Should I get the 9900? And there's not a great deal of difference in price nowadays. Now, personally, the God's honest truth answer is I think the 9900 is the better radio as far as transmit goes. It has got more power, quite a bit more power than the 6900. It comes with the standard M9 microphone. I've never needed to change it. The audio is good. It is a superb DX radio on sideband. The downsides of owning a 9900 mainly concerns there is a steep learning curve to operate the radio, and this would be for new people. If you're used to radio, you'll be straight in there, no problems. It is much more like a HF ham radio to use than the CB style of the 9900. Everything is menu based. There's lots of options to go into in the menu. Another kind of annoying feature the radio has is that although the radio will come pre-programmed with the channels that you want to use, you can very easily, without realising it, start tuning the radio, changing the settings, and you'll change the memory settings as well. It automatically saves those to your memory channel, so you can end up kind of buggering up the pre-programming, if you like, and I think we've all done that when we've owned these radios. On the other hand, obviously plus sides of it, other than the extra TX power, it's got a very good receive, it's got a fairly decent speaker. It also has a very nice clarifier. It's a very smooth clarifier, very easy to use. It is a nice radio, but I will say that if you are coming back to radio or you're new, I would possibly go with a 6900. You've just got a lot more buttons on the front of the radio. It's channelized. You've got an LED display there. It looks like a CB. It works like a CB. It's a lot easier to use the 6900. Going to bring this one to a close now. Now, those radios I've just talked about, these are only radios that I've owned or have had personal experience with. What about you people watching it? I'm sure there's radios that you've owned, maybe second-hand radios. I haven't spoken about second-hand radios, but maybe there's a suggestion you would like to make. Leave it in the comments. People will read those comments. These videos, like I say, are going to be on my channel for years and years to come, hopefully helping people get back into the hobby of CB radio. The next video, we did discuss antennas very briefly on the first video. I think I need to go right back to basics. So I think on the next video, I'll discuss and show setting up a mobile antenna. I have done this occasionally when I've been on holiday. It will be a mag mount antenna, but I think we'll talk about that. We'll show it, fit it onto a car. We'll also show how to adjust the SWR on a typical mobile antenna. That should be quite helpful. And I think we'll go on from there. The rest of it, I'll be reading the comments, and as I say, I'll be adjusting these videos accordingly moving forward. So I think that's it. Thank you for your view time. Please give me the thumbs up if you can. It will help these videos get shared, things like that. But as always, there's the thumb from Freddy in the Shed. Cheers, thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.